And in response, Skippy the Pockmarah said, "No, don't cook that. I'll eat it as is." Great sentient ninja story. After the break, Babylon 5, science fiction show by Joe Michael Straczynski, is getting a reboot, and why one YouTuber isn't throwing a childish conniption fit about the fact that this new woke show is going to ruin his life/childhood. More on that after the break. What's up, Internet? Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite shows that happens to be getting a reboot. And that is Babylon 5, created by J. Michael Straczynski. It is an amazing science fiction show, and I am a huge fan, as I said. And I hear this a lot on YouTube, especially when a reboot's made. You know, people will claim fandom of a show. I'm a huge fan, but this new woke agenda version of the show is going to ruin my life, ruin my childhood, destroy this or that, and I just can't stand for it. If there is any machine that this nerd rages against, that's the one, the YouTube hate machine. And to that end, I want to talk a little bit about Babylon 5 and really why I'm optimistic that a reboot is good and why change is good in these kind of situations. So let's start this at the beginning. Babylon 5 started life as an intended spin-off to Star Trek. The idea was Paramount and Warner Brothers were going to get together to make a fifth network after Fox had been so successful with the Fox network, the fourth network, which no one ever believed was going to happen. So Straczynski wrote a darker Star Trek series, Star Trek Babylon 5, if you will. And Roddenberry rejected it, the deal fell apart for other reasons, and what ended up happening is Warner decided to go ahead and try to make Babylon 5 by effectively making a Star Trek-style series with the serial numbers filed off. There are no Klingons, there are no Romulans, you have the Minbari, the Narn, the Centauri, and all the other species that are in Babylon 5, and a history that is not the same as Star Trek. The show is set 10 years after the Earth-Minbari War. Basically, we as a species meet a very powerful ancient species known as the Minbari. There is a massive communications breakdown due to not understanding their protocols, which leads to a war. And it's a war that we are losing hard. The Battle of the Line, which is the end of the Earth-Minbari War, is literally on our doorstep, past the moon, right on Earth border. We're considering ourselves an endangered species at this point, and the Minbari suddenly give up. We're done. No more war. Let's talk terms. Damn right. Holy crap. And this leads into some of the mysteries of the show. 10 years later, we would build the fifth of the Babylon stations. We've tried 4 others, 3 of which failed. The 4th one disappeared, so the 5th one is the one that stayed. That's really the premise of the show, and from there, it's a diplomatic station, and there's a lot of politics. Now, it is clearly easy to compare this to Deep Space Nine, as there's a lot of parallels, and that's, there's always the story that somebody, after Roddenberry said the show didn't really meet his approval, after Roddenberry's passing, somebody rifled through his stuff, found the notes, and said, let's do this. But, Captain Sisko, Captain Sinclair, Captain Sheridan, and also plot elements. Both series have a species that was once conquered and another one that was their conqueror. However, again, I think that B5 did this better. In Deep Space Nine, we had the Cardassians who'd conquered the Bajorans. The Bajorans are the more human-like species, the likable ones, and the Cardassians are a lizard-like race of bad guys. And while there are several attempts in the show to point out that not all Cardassians are bad, Gul Dukat always came off to me as a mustache-twirling bad guy. Episode 1, he basically tells Cisco, don't get comfy in that chair. This is my station and I will have it back. Mwahaha. And by the end of the series, Cisco is the emissary of the wormhole aliens, and Dukat is the emissary of the Pa Wraiths, which are the bad wormhole aliens. So, I mean, he really goes from being villain to villain. There are episodes where he relinquishes or where he aligns with them, but it's always that he's the bad guy. And Kira, the Bajoran, who is, again, our representation of Bajor at this point, is very human. And in some ways, I always felt like she kind of had this Lifetime movie quality of, I want to trust Starfleet, but I've been hurt so many times before that comes off. B5 flipped the script on this. The race that was conquered were the lizard-like Narn, and the race that was the conquerors were the far more human Centauri. We start with the Centauri as a sympathetic race. We see them as like an empire in decline. Think the British Empire post-World War II. They're no longer a superpower. And really, Jakar, the leader, the ambassador of the Narns, is an ass. He's basically a power grubber, especially early on the show. It would be easy to see in those first few episodes that he is the bad guy, or a bad guy at very least. Whereas Londo, the ambassador for the Centauri, is likable, if not pitiable. However, things change. Londo is given an opportunity by an even more powerful ancient race called the Shadows to, in effect, make Centauri Prime great again. And he takes it. We then see the reconquest of Narn. We see the Centauri becoming the great lion in the galaxy that they were. And Londo becomes a monster. Even though there's humanity there, he definitely has his monstrous qualities. And we see Jakar in chains. We see Jakar also learn that the Shadows were a species that his people dealt with before and become more spiritual. But in both cases, what we have is very three-dimensional characters, very human attributes to these characters. They're not just mustache-twirling villains and likable heroes that we want to help and protect. They are quite three-dimensional. It's one of the things that makes this show really work. Also, the fact is that this was during the Berman era of Star Trek, and one example of this is that Berman apparently insisted that this show still be episodic. Babylon 5 is a tight 5-year run. It is a series that has a beginning, middle, and an end. At the time, it was revolutionary. Nowadays, you have shows like Stranger Things, which do this kind of thing all the time, where you're basically meant to binge watch, or at least watch in order, and you have that opportunity. B5 did this first, and well before, and it is a very tight narrative. An example of this, both series have an episode or two-parters where there is martial law declared. In DS9, the Federation is concerned the changelings are taking over, so a rogue admiral declares martial law. And in this two-parter, it ends with Cisco basically reminding this admiral that, of the Federation's ethics and morals. And the admiral's going, yeah, you're totally right. Just go ahead. If you want to put the cuffs on, I get it. I'll go peacefully. Not so in Babylon 5. President Clark takes over. You have this slow march toward fascism, which, sadly, I think mirrors a lot of what we see today, with the home guard and this idea of you're with us and against us. And honestly, there's also a great racial overtone here where racism doesn't go away. This isn't the Starfleet universe where, there is no racism and we've abolished that. Instead, it's more like racism morphs. It's now not, I hate you because you have dark skin. It's, okay, so you're black, and I get that. It's not, I'm not black, I'm white, but we're both human. We are not reptiles. We don't have a big bone sticking out of our head. We're not carrion eaters. Therefore, I'm okay with you because you and I both really hate him. He's the enemy. And that comes through a lot in this show. And to that end, it culminates with Earth declaring martial law. an Earth First movement, and Babylon 5 secedes. And the episode is just so powerful because, you see humans fighting Earth fighting Earth, and the station successfully secedes from the Earth Alliance. And it stays seceded throughout the series at this point. It becomes an independent entity. And we have to deal with pick up the pieces, as it were. Something that, again, with Deep Space Nine's wrapping it up in a little bow of, yeah, you're totally right, you just don't get. And that's really where this show was brilliant. Genius. I can't stress how much this show did right. And that tight narrative also works its way into other things. There's a time travel subplot, which I won't get into, but it's pretty flawless. It's a lot harder to see, a goof. And it wasn't one of these things also where, time travel plot, we go back to 1990s Earth, and, the crew is now walking the streets listening to people singing Smash Mouth or something. No, it's all encompassed into that point, and again, without going too much into the details, it really shows what you can do when you have a plot starting, in season 1 that goes to season 5. And so you might be asking, after my obvious gushing about what a huge fan I am and this show's amazing, why it is that I'm not more worried about what they're going to do, how they're going to ruin this great show. And I can sum that up in 2 words from the show. Faith manages. The show is going to be redone by J. Michael Straczynski himself. He's the guy who created the show, and there's a lot of ways he can go with it, but this is his baby. He did it right the first time, and, if it's going to create a new show that's going to bring this series to a new generation, I'm all for it. I can't honestly imagine any scenario where they change something that it's going to ruin the show. A good example of this, actually, you might think, well, they could make a character transgender, woke, blah, 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 blah. Technically, there kind of was in the show. Delenn in the pilot was meant to be a man. They cast actress Mira Furlan to play the role, but she was under very heavy prosthesis, so she had a very jutting jawline and very angular face to make her manly. They later ignored this in the production of the show, and it became a she, of course, Delenn. So we've already seen Delenn as a man, Delenn as a woman. Not a big deal. And the show was multiracial and multicultural even in its day. I can't see where, changing anything is really going to affect it. Oh, did they make the captain black? Oh my God, how would that work? I mean, it's not like the more popular science fiction show Space on the Space Station had a black captain and that succeeded. So there is nothing I can see that any change is going to really ruin the show. There are some things I think would be welcome, one of which is, the effects on this show. It's from 1995, and it was a pioneer of CGI. And while there's some great effects, there are some effects that probably could use some goosing. And with today's CGI and technology, you can do them on a budget way better. So that's something I think will be good. The other big thing is that, again, relic of the 90s, one of their sponsors was Zima. And so the Zocalo and the bar have huge Zima signs in the back, which, even in the 90s, I don't think many people believed that it was going to last, that this brand of booze was going to last over 200 years. So getting rid of the Zima signs is going to be something else I think will be fine. But with that pilot to show also, there were a lot of little mistakes and little things that they corrected over time. In fact, there is a remastered pilot which cuts a lot of the goofiness out of it. But honestly, they can even change characters. In the pilot, there was the first officer was an Asian woman named Commander Takashima, played by Tamlyn Tomita, who would later get replaced by Claudia Christensen playing Commander Susan Ivanova, because of just not being available, I guess. But again, if they went back to Commander Takashima for the new series, fine. It doesn't ruin anything. I love the character of Ivanova, but even there, I I have the show on DVD. I can always rewatch it if there's something I think was better or worth seeing in this original. And that's just it. That's one of the things about any of these changes. It doesn't take away from what was already there. I think there's always this fear of change is a lot of it. A lot of these things, that's what this comes down to, is a fear of change. I remember when the Star Trek movies came out and people said, Zachary Quinto's not my Spock. Well, Leonard Nimoy sadly is no longer with us, but you can't just keep deep faking him or CGIing over him in hopes of having Leonard Nimoy play Spock to infinity. Or Jeffrey Hunter, or they're doing a new Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and if you think about it, those three principles have all passed. What are we going to do? Try to deep fake Jeffrey Hunter, Majel Barrett, and Leonard Nimoy? Let's have some new actors make it their own. I mean, we've gone through how many Bonds, and nobody bats an eye. If we want to see new Star Wars, we're going to have to start thinking about the possibility of Aaron Allreich as Han Solo or Billy Lord as Princess Leia. It's just going to have to happen if we want more classic Star Wars. And even, if you think about it, there was a lot of flap with Episode 1 of Star Wars when it came out. And part of that, I think, was the age, the gap between one and the original and the new one, that fans had built up in their mind what they wanted, and Lucas didn't deliver exactly what you expected. But, if you were 5 years old when that movie came out, that's what you know of as Star Wars. That's what you think of when you think of Star Wars. You think of the Clone Wars. For me, I was old enough. I was in my 20s when that came out, and yeah, I was disappointed, frustrated. But the more I look on it, I always say that Star Trek and Star Wars are a little like pizza or sex. Even the not so great ones is still better than nothing. Bitch and moan all you want about episodes 7, 8, and 9, but are they really any worse than, say, The Room or any one of 1,000 other just terrible cinematic films that you would not sit through? There's passion there, and that's a lot of it. Is you've become passionate over something you love, but that passion kind of has a dark side, and I think that's something we see in the YouTube community, is these people who prey on that idea of, I'm going to make you feel like I do, that I have to hate everything, and it's just flat out wrong. In this case, yeah, I'm not saying that this is a guaranteed slam dunk. It could go a wrong way. It could go a bad way. I could be very disappointed, but that's why I have the DVDs. That's why I have them on streaming. They're not going anywhere. But changing the race, gender identity of any major character, or even just replacing the character with a different character, isn't going to ruin the show. The show is still good. This original one was good. The new one, I would be hard pressed to see what they could do to ruin it, in all honesty. And to that end, I want to give it a shot, and in Valen's name, I will. So with that, I say adieu, and see you next time.